Judging, breeding, and ethical decision-making are often framed as a matter of rules. There are regulations to follow, standards to respect, boundaries clearly written down. And rules are important. They create structure. They define what is allowed and what is not. But rules alone do not explain why something is right or wrong. They don't teach judgment. They don't build understanding. And they don't answer what happens when no rule exists for a situation yet. That's where a deeper question begins. Is ethical behavior shaped more effectively by enforcement or by education?
Rules serve an essential purpose. They define minimum standards. They create consistency. They offer protection against obvious misuse. Without rules, systems collapse, but rules have a natural limitation. They can only regulate what has already been identified as a problem. They react. They do not anticipate. Rules tell us what we must not do. They rarely explain what we should understand, and they cannot replace personal responsibility. Because when behavior is guided only by rules, ethics become external, something imposed, something followed only as long as enforcement exists. That's why rules alone never create ethical culture. They create compliance. Rules define limits, not understanding. Still, education works differently. Education does not start with prohibition. It starts with explanation. It builds context. It creates awareness of consequences. It develops the ability to evaluate situations before a rule is needed. Education shapes internal judgment. It allows individuals to recognize when something is technically permitted, but ethically questionable. And that distinction is where true responsibility lives. When people understand why certain actions cause harm, they no longer need constant supervision to behave correctly. They regulate themselves, not because they are forced to, but because they know better. Education shapes judgment long before rules are needed.
So the question isn't whether rules are necessary. They are. The real question is, what happens in the space between written regulations? Who carries responsibility when rules are unclear? Who decides what is acceptable when enforcement is absent? And more importantly, what guides decisions when no one is watching?
Ethics cannot be sustained by fear of punishment. They require understanding. Rules may stop behavior temporarily, but education changes it permanently. When people are educated, they don't ask, "How far can I go without breaking a rule?" They ask, "What is the right thing to do here?" That shift is critical, because ethical responsibility is not about avoiding violations. It is about recognizing impact. Education builds the ability to think beyond personal gain, beyond immediate success, beyond technical compliance. It creates long-term stability. Rules provide the framework. Education provides the substance. Without education, rules become fragile. They must constantly expand, multiply, and tighten, just to keep up with behavior. But systems built on education require fewer rules over time, because responsibility comes from within. Rules can enforce behavior. Education shapes responsibility. Rules will always be necessary. They protect, they standardize, they create a common language, but they are not enough. Ethics does not grow from regulation alone. It grows from knowledge, from understanding consequences, from awareness, from education that reaches further than written boundaries. The strongest systems are not those with the strictest rules, but those where people know why those rules exist. Because in the end, rules control actions. Education shapes character.